Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Continuous Testing Report 2020, What You Need to Know, which is part of our 6-week webinar series, Sogeti Techflix. My name is Kasia and I'll be your moderator. I work with the global marketing team here at Sogeti and I'm really excited to be hosting this session today. Now, before I introduce our today's experts, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this presentation and the platform that we are using today. During the presentation, we would love to hear from you. And if you have a question to our speaker or myself, please feel free to send it through the questions bar on your control panel. We'll be answering those at the end of the session. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, we'll make sure that it is followed up afterwards. Now, I am pleased to introduce today's speakers, Antoine Aymer, who's our Global Strategic Portfolio Director for Testing, and joined today by Mark Boonen, who's the Head of Global Digital Assurance and Testing. So without further ado, I would like to kick things off and give the presentation rights to Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, hello. Thank you, Kasia. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining this session. Welcome to this webinar. What we will talk about in the coming half an hour is the continuous test report. And I'd like to introduce you this report. We, as Sogeti, we are running for many years. We are running inventories across the world, how QA testing is being performed, how organizations are responding and solving the challenges and questions around QA and testing. We have done that many years through the World Quality Report and we continue to do that, but 2 years ago we started really to look at the area of continuous testing, which is testing in the Agile front. So these reports, they really give a nice viewpoint of what's the standard in the world, what are the trends in the world, and through this report we get an understanding, but we also understand what is a good benchmark of the report. So this report is covering respondents, organizations, more than 500 organizations from mostly US, Canada, and Western Europe. So these are the regions that are being covered. And I really also want to point out who are the type of people that we interview, because these are not only QA and testing leads, but it's really a wide variety of roles that are there in the company. So we interview IT directors, developers, heads of products, VP of applications, software architects, Scrum Masters, CIOs, CDOs, and of course also QA and testing leads. But the QA and testing leads themselves are only are taking care of 13% of the respondents. The size of the companies, these are large companies and typically mid-sized companies. And if you look at the vertical coverage, we are covering all sectors. The top 3 sectors are organizations from the financial services, so banks and insurance, the high-tech sector, the engineering companies, and consumer goods and retail. But in addition to that, we also have viewpoints from telco, manufacturing, energy utilities, healthcare, automotive, and transportation and public sector. So it is a wide report, a wide survey across all those type of companies, and I think it's a really good benchmark. What we really know today is, of course, that Agile and DevOps way of developing has more or less become the standard of operation. But how we are and how organizations are dealing with quality assurance, I think that is really the question that we're looking at. So I'd like to hand over to Antoine, who is one of the lead authors of the report, to give us well the summary of the key findings of the report and take us to that report in the coming half an hour. Antoine, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so I just want to add one thing about the report itself, is that we had screenings, so questionnaire through screenings to 500 practitioners, but that was not the only way of interviewing. We also pursued with deep dive interviews with specific respondents and also delivery managers and different stakeholders. So it was a combination of online reports, but also interviews, which makes it a little bit more, let's say, actionable. All right, so I'm always asked when I present to share a little bit about the continuous testing. So I will provide a definition. It's just a definition of it, just to set the scene. So continuous testing, in my eyes, is really the ongoing practice of testing, automation testing across every activity throughout the life cycle. And it really goes for me from requirement gathering through production. And I want to include these two aspects. It's a broad aspect. The benefits obviously include faster feedback, better test coverage, but also one of the key things, especially in Agile, is more developers' involvement in testing. Obviously, the idea, why do we spend so much time and effort in implementing continuous testing, is to uncover and fix unexpected behaviors as soon as they are injected, really with the goal to ensure that the business value is achieved as expected. And this is really what I think we should aim as as an ambition. So we have, with that, we have structured the report in 5 different chapters, and you can figure out where you have areas of improvement or things maybe to innovate on. Shift left. Right, then we have test orchestration that has a look at the entire pipeline, and a bit of a deeper eye on supporting processes where you have virtual services, test data management, test environment, and mobile lab. We also had a specific eye on shift right. And compared to last year, this is a new chapter. We assessed how companies are getting organized, all right, and what are the skills that they have an eye on today. Okay, so all right. What is the first question is, what is the current state of continuous testing maturity in organizations? So first, as often with reports, it's not necessarily possible to share a definition of continuous testing. So we ask people to do the best with their thought, that the own definition of continuous testing. And here you can see only 22% have already and really fully adopted continuous testing within their development lifecycle. And well, compared to last year, it's not a huge boom. Actually, it's more like stable. And I think this slow increase in maturity really demonstrates that the path to continuous testing, it's certainly not an easy process. It's not something we can do over time, over day, overnight, because there's so much into it. But the thing is, we need as an industry to go beyond automation testing by simply automating a checkbox functional test scripts to positioning quality at the very heart of the development lifecycle. Again, that's a bold statement, but we know it's actually difficult to achieve here. The idea is to really transition, and this is what the theme that we've been hearing from respondents. We need to transition from quality as a stage, where you have a bit of law enforcement when things are, it says, okay, go black or white, to quality as more as a concept that is owned by everybody from planning to production. And this really requires evolving skills, evolving culture, evolving organizations, evolving of the underlying supportive technological layer. And also, obviously, the culture, the collaborations, the visibility, the transparency among all stakeholders. Right. So certainly not an easy thing to achieve. So, what are most companies using as a continuous practice today? Well, you can see testing in production scores really high, almost same as last year. That is, very extremely interesting. I think the idea here is really how we can align quality testing with business risk, and really ensuring that whatever we're doing in quality and testing successfully and effectively assess the end user experience. And we know we've been discussing about user experience for a while, but this is absolutely so important here. So the few things that we have, monitor the continuous testing pipeline. We score second. Really with the objective to understand how to increase the efficiency of our work. and not just the effectiveness of it. And I will come back on these two different ones a little bit later. We need to be empowered how to prioritize requirement by risk, so we can, test the top ones first. I want to understand the risk impact of my test failures. What else do we have here? Using a model-based approach to optimize our test coverage. And this test design piece, I think, has been overlooked for some time in continuous testing. And we can see a rise of, obviously, XDD approach, but especially around model-based testing. Overall rating of automations is still pretty low. I'm still worried about it, as I've been in quality for like almost 20 years now. The idea is how do we automate test fast, but with minimal maintenance, okay? And especially how we can automate testing that fits in the same sprint as we do. We also have, third from the top, using analytics, and this is obviously something extremely important. And when we talk about DevOps, we forgot about Ops Dev. Okay, how we can use all these analytics, this data, this actionable insight from productions to increase the accuracy of testing. And one of the aspects is how can we use analytics from productions to identify the blind spots, the things that we didn't think that should be tested, or in a different way. And obviously we have different topics, and I think if we have a look at the graphs here, they almost have the same score, 30 to 45%, and that also leads to the complexity of implementing continuous testing, because we have to do a lot of things. But here at least you have a sort of like a priority list of what others are doing. Okay, so one of the probably the key challenge that we've seen is almost, I think, more than half of the respondents here, if I can do the math, stated that they find in-sprint testing extremely challenging. And this usually comes from poorly defined requirements or user stories if you do Agile, that really leads to coding errors, but also testing inefficiency because you have test cases that not necessarily aligned with the user stories and the requirement, or you are leading designing of test design to the intuition of people, which is interesting but probably not good enough. So this, designing and maintenance of meaningful test cases that really aligned with the end user's expectations is still a very significant challenge for the respondents and for most companies out there. So the maintenance as well of test scripts takes, I would say, an overwhelming share of the investment in automation. So this is really where I think we, as an industry, we need to figure out how we can really diminish the maintenance of scripts. Obviously, test data and test environment, unfortunately, are still seen as the greatest impediments to early automation. Where else did we got from the overall report in terms of challenge? I would say the skills, finding qualified engineers that can really participate to the development effort, and that we don't call them testers, but quality engineers, quality developers of quality assurance that fits in the development cycle. These are difficult to find. All right, so overall, we have three things that I want to retain. The autonomy that Agile teams give to people has a drawback, which is the lack of standardizations, the lack of technology, the inconsistency in the different methods and methodologies that people are using. The difficulty to collaborate still today, like test data management, I will come back on that point a little bit later, is still one of the greatest impediment and risk of being the weakest link that fails, that actually has a very poor impact on quality. The lack of end-to-end validations and ownership, and this also has an impact on how we are organized. The lack of measurability, and that's why we are going to cover the metrics and data in the orchestration chapter a little bit here. High velocity as well, so everybody wants to go faster and faster, and sometimes, well, most of the time you can see in the report itself that testing is not fit for purpose. It's not really fast enough. But even when it's automating, it takes too much time because maybe we have wrongly designed our test cases that end up on having inefficient test cases. Automation testing can be very successfully done. However, it's not efficient enough. So how we as a team can change to fit testing in the same sprint, the same cycle, and have much more robust quality practices. The last one is evolution of the organizations, which is absolutely key. But I'll take that point just a little bit later. Okay, so shift left. Shift left is is obviously very well-known practice. I think we've been talking about it for so long that I think everybody should know what I'm referring to. The idea, again, is to identify and address the defects as early as possible. Okay, I know we can go much deeper than that, but just for sake of introduction, this is what I'm going to share. So the idea is, instead of validating quality in a sort of time box stage late in the life cycle, we allow much faster, much reliable testing across all different disciplines. The one thing that we've seen from that report, again, is the designing of the test cases, which are extremely complex. The other thing that we can see from shift left is the poor level of automation that is still far from being acceptable. I think go down to that point. There's still one aspect, and we are covering much more of that topic in the report. API testing, I think it's still overlooked. And if you compare UI and API testing in terms of efforts to set up, to maintain, to execute, so the whole lot, I think the efficiency of API testing that we've seen, that we are experiencing, is significantly higher than UI testing. And yet it's something that it's not surprisingly fully embraced by our industry. So I'm hoping that we can actually do it much better. Another thing that we've seen, and we're saying with Agile that code quality and quality is everybody's responsibility. However, what we've seen in shift left is an impact on that aspect where it's actually very complex to measure quality as a broad concept, what it means in terms of ELT aspect of quality, reliability, maintainability, testability. So each practice of shift left measures some aspect of quality, but the idea is we miss that gathering of data to have a meaningful definition. And we've seen from the report as well, especially for those companies who have embedded QA inside a feature team, finding a consensus of the definition of done, for instance, as simple as that. Okay, so how challenging is this topic when it comes to ensuring test case coverage? Well, I think it's pretty clear here that what I've been mentioning, I think twice already, most companies end up with far more test cases than they need. And there are a lot of overlap, redundancy, because we are using intuitions, we are using experience, we are using different approaches, but in the end, it becomes extremely challenging. And we've heard, we've interviewed people with thousands and thousands of test cases, and that just ends up in a nightmare. So how to deal with it? The idea here is really to have a different mindset of the test design phase again. And when I refer to test design, for me, it's the act of creating, of writing, of updating test cases in response to the change in the requirement. It is absolutely critical. And we've seen during the interviews that we've did, some people who have truly automating the test design phase, and they really made testing much more systematic, much more reactive to change. And this is the objective of it. It's how to fit testing and quality in the same cycle, in the same sprint, while allowing everybody, stakeholders, the three amigos, to stay in alignment, really, and to remain flexible on whatever needs to be developed and tested for. I know there's an emergence of model-based testing here, and I think probably model-based, the word testing in model-based, it's probably leading us to some incoherence or misunderstanding about what it is. The idea here is to model the functionalities to be tested, but not to model the test per se. And this is interesting because when you model the functionality to be tested, you actually create a model capable of representing every test for that functionality here. And this is also one of the key aspects that we've seen successful teams do, is really shift test design left and automating that part with the positive ripple effect on code quality. Okay, orchestration. Okay, orchestration is sometimes there's also misunderstanding about what we mean by orchestrations, and here orchestrations, and that's why I have this this line here that expands from requirements to production. It offers a much broader approach to testing. Automation testing deals with automating a single task, a functional script, an API script, performance testing, whereas orchestrations looks at the entire operations to figure out exactly where optimizations can take place. It's all about the efficiency of things, how are we doing, how are we using our time, how are we managing the resources that we have to achieve the goals that we have to achieve. So it's all about delivering comprehensive visibility into testing and understand each phase, each activity in the pipeline, who is responsible for what, areas of improvement, track metrics. And this is an amazing theme to address as we want to move away from simple automation testing to continuous testing. Okay, so what are companies today adopting as part of test orchestrations? And you can see here automation testing cycles, automated toolchain, which is, I would say, the basic layer of it. Complete audit trail as well, you know, very important. I need to have an eye on the task to understand if my testing was on target and how I should be doing differently this time. I want to get recommendations on things. How accurate and efficient my testing was. Why was defects leaked in productions? What have I missed to get the greater insight on things? How much time does performance testing take? How much time does API testing take? How much time does documentation and reporting on the efficiency take? What can I automate? And this is all the different aspects that orchestrations can bring. And here you have, you know, all these different aspects. Okay. All right. So there's another, let's say, critical point here that is extremely overlooked, I would say, by industry, is how do we measure the effectiveness, and I want to include the word efficiency here, in the continuous testing process. And why does it matter? Because we are in a culture of continuous improvement, and I don't want to use it as a buzzword, but really as a deep culture, one that is sustainable, one that requires careful attention to a lot of things. So what are the data that most companies are using today to enhance the effectiveness, or to measure the effectiveness here? Production data. Obviously, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, user feedback and adoption of new functionality. And here I think we need to go beyond just assessing the feedback, but how can we correlate automatically the feedback that we are getting from users directly linked to the requirements, to the user stories? How can we also, if we're using modeling methodologies, how can we also get the production flows, compare them to the models, the flows that we have models, and identify which one should be prioritized? I think when it comes to software testing metrics, we need to go beyond addressing questions that what have we tested, or what is the automation rate. We need to get to address questions that are much more detailed. What should I test? What should I automate? What to automate more? What are the often artifacts in my test management system? When should I stop testing while meeting the same quality levels? And yeah, okay, given this is probably beyond, let's say, pure metrics, but I would say these are key data that need to be brought to the eye of the decision maker in QA, or the developers, or the product owner, or the Scrum Master. Everybody has to have an eye on the overall effectiveness of continuous testing for the greater good. So here I keep playing with two words, effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness really deals with the objective, the outcome. Have we achieved the aim? Have we done what we were supposed to do? And the other aspect is efficiency, which is how we are utilizing resources to achieve the specific goal. And I want to also have a link to the new TMAC book that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, which really goes in depth into this, how to set up a culture of metrics in continuous testing. And yet, yes, you can have an idea of what others are doing here, but I think setting up a culture of KPIs and metrics it's a whole project. It's not something that just can be left on an article that says here are the 10 top metrics that everybody's using. So while this report gives some interesting insight, I think we need to have a step back in terms of what are the issues that we're trying to address and see which KPIs on the long run we should aim at. So one of the things that we've also covered as part of orchestrations, we wanted to have an eye on what are the more difficult use cases and things that should have been addressed by our industry for a long time. And but what are companies having an eye on? And essentially, when I put a questionnaire together with my team, I saw that self-healing scripts, that scores second from bottom, should have been probably on the top, because it's probably the one nightmare that I can think of. And I think, well, you can see the results here. Only 9% said, well, we really want to focus on having some self-healing test scripts. I think now we are still under the, let's say, the good impressions that AI is doing. And here you have on the top, I want to use predictive test selection and optimize test set. That's very interesting, and I think it's actually much more strategic to nail that specific point earlier. But that's again, that's very interesting to understand how others are doing and what, as an industry, we are trying to achieve as the tougher questions. Okay, all right, supporting processes. So supporting processes, we had to look at, let's say, 4 supporting processes, for the sake of another word, virtual services, so service virtualization, test data management, test environment, and mobile apps. The things that without you can't actually do proper testing. So, well, you have, I think it's pretty clear, and you can figure out yourself in the report that test environment is still one of the greatest impediments to continuous testing. There's a lot of good insight on how much time is taken by test environment. In terms of trends, as we went to the interviews with some key delivery managers of test environment, we as an industry, we have a look at containerizations, cloud provisioning, hybrid cloud provisioning, service virtualization, even for the infrastructure side of things, how we wanted to use RPA to eliminate some of the latency that test environment management is taking away from the team. But I think probably one of the things that I would love to deep dive a little bit on is test data. So here you have a few very nice outcome. Here you have practices. Okay, how others are managing test data. Okay, so here it was a multi-coded question, so rank 1, 2, 3. What were your top 3 test data practices? And on the right hand side, you have the top 3 challenges. Well, I think most of it is pretty self-explanatory. Test data coverage is optimized. And in terms of, we wanted to give it a bit of an insight. What we mean by that is the what to test, how much to test, when to stop testing, the integration of test data inside UI testing, inside API, even inside performance testing, inside security testing, integrations with also any model-based testing tools here. But overall, the level of maturity on test data, it's still pretty poor here. And we know, especially with GDPR, with regulation, it is so critical to have a common mechanism to self-service, to virtualize, to professionalize, to industrialize test data at the service of the all stakeholders. We're seeing far too many manual processes here. And again, I'm not just saying it on experience. I'm just, just having an eye on the interviews and the data that we've seen. There was probably one thing here, and I'm not sure I actually highlighted it. Okay, let me see. Yes. Synthetic test data is generated automatically. So it's sort of, this is a newcomer. I don't think we had it last year as an option. And this is provided by AI. And here the idea is to use a small subset of masked data from production. And instead of having some additional masking information and providing it, we are based on the initial subset of test data. We are generating synthetic data automatically, and it has obviously report benefits on the rest, since there's no compliance issues. The only thing is we need to make sure that the pattern, the diversity of the synthetic data is matching the source file. But this is a rising practice that we're seeing. And for people who do not necessarily have a strong, mature test data management practice, we are seeing much more practice to use test data, synthetic test data as a technology. All right. Okay. Fourth chapter, shift right. I think I briefly talked about it earlier. The success in shift right, which is testing in productions and the various practices, includes various practices. It includes advanced correlations between technical data, but also non-technical data. And I think of the social media aspect, the user sentiment that more companies are using, but it's still a bit overlooked. We have also an eye on we analyze the load, the data usage patterns, the logs, the reliability, the availability, all these utility aspects of application system in production. This shift right, we've also assessed different practices. There's actually greater usage of crowd testing. I think 39% of companies are using crowd testing. And especially on that topic, I think in the context we are in today, crowd testing, with the fact that people can test at home, professionally doing it, I think it's going to be an emerging topic that we see, especially in the context we are in, with a lot of home working. We've also seen from the report increased usage of the mining of user feedback data from traditional and non-traditional feedback channels. And I've been mentioning social media earlier, especially for end user apps. The overall concept is obviously not to shift right for the sake of shifting right here. There's obviously a sort of ops dev story. Is we need to build a test recommendation engine, or a process that helps us prioritize testing, that helps us increase the accuracy of our job. What should we prioritize? Maybe use data to build a Pareto rule. What are the only the 20% of user stories where I can see 80% of the defects in production? And we can do the same between user stories and business impact, with defects and business impacts. But for this we need to correlate all the different data sources again to provide visibility back to the QA leader. Okay, so the various strategy for testing digital apps, several here. We use data from the pipeline to assist in designing our test strategy. I can see here, I think I've highlighted a few here. We assess production logs and crashes. We're using crowd testing. I just talked about it. And a newcomer, chaos testing as well, and we have shared a few articles beyond the continuous testing on that specific aspects. Okay, so how are teams getting organized here? So this is an interesting chapter because we've seen that Agile approach require drastic changes in whatever practice I've been showing on, in orchestrations, in execution of QA, in automating QA. And this actually implies a mindset, a strategic mindset at an executive level, to think of all the methodologies, the processes, how we can choose the underlying technology, but what is the impulse that we can use from an organization standpoint to trigger a cultural change. And out of all the respondents in the interview we've done, the way people are organized has a true deep impact on the rest of the activities and previous 4 chapters here. It's much easier to figure out how to orchestrate the entire pipeline, how to eliminate the silos, how to figure out the areas of improvement, and how to truly figure out how to find a practice, a way to collaborate, to cooperate between all the different stakeholders, the roles, the responsibility, the skills here. So the interesting aspect here is that you can see here top from the chart here, most respondents said that 40% of their testing is supported by a specialized quality engineering team. So it really indicates that the hybrid model, meaning that we are embedding QA inside the feature team, but we also have a dedicated specialized team. This hybrid model is really here to stay here. There's an evolution of centralized bodies, such as QA management offices, and everybody should actually figure out what they should be responsible for. 33% are sharing that they integrate quality engineers within feature team, and obviously, well, it's pretty obvious. We need to help quality much earlier and define in-sprint test strategy, figure out what do we mean by done in the definition of done, how to automate test scenarios, how to monitor the quality levels, and how to monitor, again, the quality, the efficiency and effectiveness of our test activities. One of the aspects that I've seen was a little bit overlooked as I was introducing the report is the end-to-end squad. And well, a third of companies are still, which is, again, don't misunderstand me, are still using an end-to-end squad. And the idea also is to do 2 things, is to validate the end-to-end customer journey, so to be an advocate of the end user's experience, and technically also to cover the integration risk, which is sometimes overlooked from a greater perspective. So I think probably disregarding how anybody is organized, there must be a strategic thought, a strategic process around managing, sharing, spreading the guidance of QA, especially inside Agile testing, because there are so many impediments, so many bottlenecks that we have to figure out as a team all together how to deal with all these impediments to achieve the business values. So in terms of skilling, and when we were targeting who to interviews, we play security testing because that's a key one, but I didn't think that security testing would have scored that high. I would have thought about test design, about API testing, test data management, but security testing actually scores very high. And it's very interesting how why actually that scores really high. And it's not about turning developers or turning traditional functional testers in becoming security experts. It's all about, as we were interviewing and asking companies what's happening here, it was about how we can provide support to educate developers in order to achieve higher level of security much earlier, right? And really enable security to be embedded alongside development skills, so they can really understand the environment in which they are working on, and really having some security experts do maybe some pair programming, but also educating them with regards to all these security patterns. So a different way of doing things, and it's probably one of the emerging topics that we are going to definitely monitor in next year's topic. So as we move on, and there's so much more that you can see in the report here, one of the key things, and this was actually captured by one of the interviews, continuous testing is a mean to an end. It's a supportive layer here. We don't want to be focused on testing. We want to focus on quality, on achieving business goals, and really spreading that aspects, that mindset across every step of the life cycle. And this is so critical here. So we should really elevate, and this is what most companies are doing today, really focusing on quality. But again, easier said than done, as you've seen all the different practices that needs to be embedded here. There's probably one aspect that didn't touch base too much on, is the adoption of new technologies, such as AI. We talked about getting some help to predict test cases, to optimize, to do smarter testing, because we don't have enough time. There obviously were some very strong discussions we had with practitioners around how to include predictive analytics, code analytics, intelligent automation, self-healing, in terms of not just in terms of scripts, but in terms also of data management. How can we apply AI in production analytics, and a little bit also on this generating synthetic data. So there's a flurry of AI activities here. Various software vendors are providing different support here. It's definitely something to have an eye on in the future. So where can you have an eye on the report itself? How can you just read a bit further? So you can do two things. Either you can get the slides from me, and I can happily send you the link. You can copy the link, take a screenshot out of it, or you can just Google continuous testing report, Capgemini Sogeti, and you'll get the report itself. Right, I know I was a bit fast. That's probably passion. And Mark, if we want to open maybe for some discussions or reflections, questions, things that we might have overlooked.
Yeah, very good, Antoine. Kasia, do we have any questions from the audience? And do we still have time for that?
We have just about 2 minutes. We have a couple of questions. If you still have some more questions, post them in your questions bar, and we'll try to answer them after the webinar. But since we covered so much, Antoine and Mark, and thank you for that really great presentation. If you could, in 1 minute, provide the key points, kind of per chapter, what are we looking at?
Okay, all right. Well, okay, all right, that's a good one. Okay, all right. I try to do less. I would say chapter 1, shift left. The key things here, the key challenge was the designing and the maintenance of test cases is absolutely huge. So the key recommendations here is to automate test design, is to strongly review the way you do test design. Okay, that's I think this is chapter 1, maybe with model-based testing. Chapter 2, test orchestration. Almost 80% of interviewers said they are getting visibility throughout the life cycle, and as a challenge, right? And we know it's usually an overlooked topic, but we need to figure out how to orchestrate the pipeline and to figure out how we can address efficiency and effectiveness of the entire pipeline. Chapter 3, the main impediment is test data management alongside with test environment. So the beauty here of test data management, it might be technical, but it does not mean that you should transform your automation, your continuous testing practices to add proper test data management practice. So definitely something to consider. Shift right, which is chapter number 4. shift right practices today are still far from being widespread, but this is so important in order to increase the accuracy of testing practices that we're doing before production. So we have to have an eye on it. And again, chapter 5, the good news is that we are still seeing a hybrid organization model that really provides quality at the core, inside the feature team, but also outside the feature team. So this is definitely at least a good way to organize things and things to pursue in the future. That's my 1 minute.
Let's say it was 1 minute. Excellent. Okay, guys, I have one more question here, and let's close after that. I already know TPI next. Besides this, how could I measure the maturity of continuous testing in a project?
Okay, so this is all about establishing a culture of metrics. And I know there are a lot of articles on social media, on LinkedIn about, okay, here are the top 10 metrics you should follow to measure the efficiency of testing. This is, but this is not a small project. To figure out how to decide which indicators, KPI, data to follow, it's something much deeper, because you need to figure out what business change you need to address here. So I think there's probably two things in mind that I have beyond balancing the effectiveness and efficiency of KPIs. Is I need my indicators, my culture of metrics, to help me prioritize against business risk. And the second topic is I need to figure out how to automate my end-to-end processes and be efficient in doing it. So these are the two things. And from what we've seen, too many companies today do not have a proper culture of metrics. So this is definitely something that does not require technical knowledge, but a strategic eye on the long-term view to enhance better quality. That's my view.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and thank you to both of you for presenting. Thank you to all our attendees and for your questions. And I just want to remind you that you can tune in for more of our Techflix series, which you can find on the Sogeti website. And we have a lot of interesting topics. Again, this webinar will be running again in May. If you want to pass on that information to your colleagues, more than welcome. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you all, and we wish you a great day.